Welcome to the British and World Literature English 403B Weekly Starter for the week of February 16th through 20th. As you're probably watching this on Tuesday, you recognize that you had a day off yesterday. If you're watching this early, you know that you have a day off for President's Day on Monday. Let's get started. All right, so as you can see, we have the 16th is a President's Day holiday. So that means that starting on the 17th, you're going to analyze Lord Byron and his two poems. Also, make sure you take the required weekly starter quiz. If you are trying to find the poems for this week, please note that they are at pages 97 through 102 in your Journeys anthology. You'll also be reading this week Ode to the West Wind by Percy Shelley, and then beginning your readings of Keats's poems. All right, so let's get into the meat of this session. As we talk about poems and the different techniques that authors, and we'll say specifically poets, use, we need to understand that they aren't just there for the heck of it, that poetic elements create themes and meanings. Poets consciously and sometimes subconsciously use elements such as metaphors, similes, apostrophes, sound devices, etc. to create and enhance meaning themes in their poems. And we're going to talk about that today and look at some of the poems and see how Lord Byron and Shelley in particular have done those things. Understanding these elements, so in understanding the elements of literary devices, can help us understand nuances and subtleties and deeper meanings in poetry. So particularly if you struggle with poetry or you want a deeper understanding of poetry, understanding these devices and how they function is really key. All right, so in this starter, we're going to review Lord Byron's When We Two Parted and Lord Byron's Darkness. And then we're also going to look a little bit at Ode to the West Wind by Shelley and talk specifically about certain devices and how they function in the poem. All right, so let's start by looking at Lord Byron's When We Two Parted. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. I'm going to stop after each little section or stanza to talk about some of the ideas and some of the techniques. When we two parted in silence and tears, half broken hearted to sever for years. Pale grew thy cheek and cold, colder thy kiss. Truly that hour foretold sorrow to this. All right, so if we have numerous devices, but a couple ones that I want to pull out is this repeated sound called sibilance, and that's the repeated S sound. So we have in silence and tears. So ask yourself, why would Byron repeat that S sound? There are numerous ideas. Number one, that having the silence and tears have similar sounds emphasizes both those ideas, that they parted in silence and sorrow, this tears. It also adds this sound, which we have things like snakes and almost this hissing. It can be a negative connotation. So we can say that immediately a mood and tone is created of sadness and sorrow. Half broken hearted to sever for years. Again, we have a repeated S sound and R sound in this case. The repeated R sound is called consonance. Notice that it doesn't come at the beginning. If it was at the beginning, it would be alliteration. The R sound is a harsh sound. Cacophonous or harsh sounding is so again, it emphasizes the tone, the meaning of that this is a negative element. This isn't a mutual parting, that this does carry sorrow and a negative element. And so the author is emphasizing that idea, and for us to understand tone of the speaker, it's really key to look at pieces like that. Then we have other elements such as imagery, such as pale grew thy cheek and cold, colder thy kiss. The repetition of the cold, colder emphasizes this frigidness. So let's continue on. The dew of the morning sunk chill on my brow. It felt like the warning of what I feel now. Thy vows are all broken and light is thy fame. I hear thy name spoken and share in its shame. I know that got cut off for you. So looking here, some things to look at. Of course, we have the rhyme scheme, which is parted tears, hearted years, so A, B, A, B. Excuse me, I just went ahead here. That emphasizes a lot of love poetry, but it also can have a brokenness, so A, B, A, B. So two partners, but they're not together. And so that rhyme scheme can emphasize that. We also have the human link to nature here through the speaker. Let's continue on. They name thee before me, a knell to mine ear. A shudder comes o'er me. Why wert thou so dear? They know not I knew thee, who knew thee too well. Long, long shall I rue thee, too deeply to tell. Again, some repetition to emphasize the length of how long he will rue or curse that relationship. Continuing on, in secret we met, in silence I grieve, that thy heart could forget, thy spirit deceive. If I should meet thee after long years, how should I greet thee with silence and tears? And there's a repetition of silence and tears as in the closing and the opening of the poem. So again, the key that I want to show you, I haven't pulled out everything, I haven't analyzed this to the full extent, but I just want to give you a couple of things to think about as you analyze the poem. What are some other techniques that Byron uses to create meaning? What do you think he's saying here? All right, let's move on. His next poem, Darkness, has to do with a volcano. It's based in reality. Let's go ahead. I want to just pull out a few things here and let you analyze it more fully yourself. So he says, I had a dream which was not all a dream. So stopping there, immediately we have this element of romanticism, the idea of dreams and imagination, but not quite all dreams and reality. That's something that romantics often really look at. The bright sun was extinguished, and the stars did wander darkling in the eternal space, rayless and pathless, and the icy earth swung blind and blackening in the moonless air. Morn came and brought no day. And men forgot their passions in the dread of this their desolation, and all hearts were chilled into a selfish prayer for light. All right, so again, this is talking about, you can see we have the volcano and eclipses and every elements. What kind of mood do you see here? Since you're not responding, notice that we have a bright sun extinguished. Stars wander darkly. And so we have dark romanticism elements here. Still, though, nature is this awe-inspiring force, which is can not only be a place for inspiration and solace and comfort that we've talked about, but it also is this awe-inspiring power that can be more than human nature. So look at, men forgot their passions because of what nature is doing. All right, so let's move on to Percy Shelley's Ode to the West Wind. Couple of notes. An ode is a form that implies deep pondering and honor to the subject. So we immediately can know that that's kind of what Shelley's looking at by calling it ode. The other element we want to look at, and I want you to watch for, is the technique called apostrophe. This is the act of addressing something that is absent or cannot respond. Also, where do you see the shift in the poem? All right, so let's look. O wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, thou from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven like ghosts from an enchanter fleeing. All right, let's pause there. So we have alliteration, wild west wind. Why do you think that Percy Shelley uses the alliteration of the W sound? Well, it certainly emphasizes each word here, doesn't it? So that's key because we want to know that it's wild and it's west and it's wind. But if you do the W sound, it almost sounds like the wind as well. And so that emphasizes the topic, the west wind. We almost hear this west wind as we read the poem. We also have thou, and this is called the familiar, it's an older familiar form. So there's two things. In Romantic poetry by the 18th, 19th century, they no longer used thou speaking to each other. So it would have been a reverential or more formal. But at the same time, looking back at the Renaissance when thou was familiar, it actually was the familiar form. So we have two things going on here. We have Percy Shelley being familiar with nature and connected to nature, but also showing a reverence for nature. So that's really key. Then we have personification, giving this west wind breath and being alive. So let me ask you two things. So we have this apostrophe, oh wild west wind. The speaker is addressing the west wind. We also have personification. By these two elements, making the west wind human and also addressing it, what element is enhanced here? What meaning do we get from having those elements? Let me pause here for you can think. All right, since it's a starter and you can't answer, one key element is that it connects human beings with nature. If nature seems human, then we are on an equal footing, aren't we, with nature. And nature can be then a place where we can find truth and be awe-inspired by it. All right, let's continue on. There is definitely more we could talk about, but because it's a starter and I want you to analyze the poem more fully, I'm just going to give you some basics. All right, here we go. Yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence-stricken multitudes, O thou who chariotest to the dark wintry bed the winged seeds where they lie cold and low, each like a corpse within its grave, until thine azure sister of the spring shall blow her clarion over the dreaming earth and fill, driving sweet buds like flocks to feed in air, with living hues and odors plain and hill, wild spirit which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, hear, oh hear. So again, ends with apostrophe addressing and asking the wind to hear. Now notice these images here, and that it creates a mood of darkness and danger, and actually kind of almost wasteland-like. This is the autumn wind, so autumn has to do with death, but at the same time this is a destroyer and preserver. So that double element here of some dark elements, but the positive, the life-giving element of nature. We have similes here, like a corpse, which again emphasizes the death-like element of autumn that's talked about here, pestilence-stricken and such. So look at those elements, ask yourselves questions like why, for instance, does Shelley break here the stanza when he's continuing the thought? One idea could be that he's talking about a breaking of seasons, a changing of seasons, so he changes the stanza to emphasize that idea. All right, so those are some things to think about as you read the poems. You can come and get more ideas in our weekly spotlights as always. So for the Phrase That Pays quiz, here is the question. What is one way we discuss that apostrophe enhances the meaning in Ode to the West Wind? A, apostrophe makes the wind seem far away and beyond human comprehension. B, addressing the wind is almost human, links humans and nature as one. And C, apostrophe makes the poem sound cool. Hopefully you chose B. B is the answer. All right, so thank you so much for joining me. Have a great week. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.